people are always looking down at their phone. And it's a shame because there's so much life going on around us.
Welcome to Unsung Leaders, a weekly podcast of behind-the-scenes innovators who you may not be familiar with.
Now, Bill, these are team players who create workable solutions for society. People who do great things without needing to steal the spotlight.
So come on, society, let's put down our selfie sticks and achieve great things.
Together.
Hey, Steve. You're in a mood today, I can tell.
Oh, I'm fired up.
Oh, he's fired up.
I was on a plane last night from
Yeah.
Orlando,
Yeah.
which didn't get in till 12:30.
You do a lot of that stuff.
I do, but I don't like when the pilot's bragging about, we're going to get you there early.
Oh.
And then you're sitting, then they say, it's like, I got some bad news. We got here so early, we're going to have to sit out here on the runway
Oh, right.
for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, like there's some plane's going to hit us because we shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Bill.
Yeah, I thought you were fired up because we have as a
I
guest
am.
today,
I love this.
we have Bill Pugin, who is the founder of the Sign Language Company, a premier sign language.
Which sign language? It's
The Sign
got it.
Language
Okay.
Company.
It's the sign language company.
The premier. That's right. That's correct. So we have to mind our P's and Q's here because we're talking about communication strategies and effective communication and how that relates in business and in life. And Bill's a really interesting guest from the aspect of his whole career is based on interpreting for deaf people what he hears and then interprets into American Sign Language. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. And Steve.
Thank you.
So I've known Bill.
I have airplane stories too, but I won't tell them
That's very
right
good.
now.
We can get to them.
Okay.
Oh dear.
Okay.
Here we go.
I used sign language last night on somebody who stepped on me. So
Middle finger.
we'll
don't
talk
count.
about that later.
That does not count.
It's universal. Mhm.
That's right.
I know more than I thought. This is
There
good.
you go.
You know, it's interesting. I'll just tell you real quickly. I've known Bill for just about 30 years. I was fresh out of film school and was writing a script about an interpreter. And I called the Amundsen Theater, which is the big theater in town here in Los Angeles. And I asked them, I said, who's the best sign language interpreter in town? And they said Bill Pugin.
Oh.
And so I got
paid them.
Do you remember that? I got a hold of you, and I actually took sign language courses because I wanted to crawl into the head of the character I was writing. I'm pretty miserable at it. I'm not a talented sign language person, but Bill certainly is. So I'm glad that he's on the show. And again, I think it's a really fascinating topic because so often, as Steve was mentioning pre-show, we hear
In the green room?
in our green room here at Embassy Row Productions in Los Angeles, that people hear but they don't listen. And
That's true. And
yeah, go ahead.
but I was just going to double back to what you'd said when you were my student. It was then when you were my student that I learned patience as well. So,
Now I'm giving you the sign language for the middle finger.
no, you were a good student, as I recall.
I tried. I was
Yeah,
I'm
was good.
yeah. I was
Yeah.
I tend to give things 110%. Sometimes in the wrong direction, but that's just life. So
that was then.
So
We've moved on.
Yes. So your sign language company is founded in many different modalities. So you are a interpretation company, and you interpret all sorts of different things for different people, right? Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Well, it's a full-service interpreting agency where we contract with hospitals, law firms, school districts, businesses, individuals, any person or thing that needs interpreting. And because of the passage of the ADA back in 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act, there's much more of a need for interpreters to make sure that everything is accessible for the deaf and hard of hearing. So I had been interpreting. This is my 43rd year, I think, now as an interpreter. And the way it sort of started for me was that I couldn't keep up with all the work. There was just, like the Amundsen referred me to you, but so did a lot of other people. So I couldn't do all the jobs that were coming my way. So I started to ask fellow interpreters if they could help me out. And that's how the agency started. And then it just kind of built from there. but we have all genres, including the entertainment industry. So we're sort of the leading agency that works in film and television, commercials, music videos, and that kind of thing.
As a conduit for deaf actors, and then also to teach sign language to actors. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, we on-set interpret for deaf actors, and we also tutor actors who have to sign for a variety of reasons, whatever their character is, and whatever their need for signing is. There's an Ashton Kutcher movie we worked on that I worked on for several months called A Lot Like Love, and he had to sign. He had to learn to sign because his brother in the film was a deaf actor, Ty Giordano, and then his mother in the film also had to get tutored because she signed as well in the film. So it's yeah, we do a lot of tutoring for hearing actors.
And like you had mentioned, you're not a one-man show, so you have a whole stable of very talented people. How do you maintain the quality of those people? How do you
Oh, we don't.
Oh, okay.
No, we try.
This is supposed to help your business, this podcast, not hurt it, Phil.
No, I'm all into honesty now. No, it's tough because we provide interpreting services nationwide. Actually, internationally, we have people working in Canada, and I've had people working in France and Mexico, and so I obviously can't meet each and every one of those interpreters that's representing the sign language company, but I vet them pretty well.
Bill, this is Steve. I'm curious because a lot of times I'll see interpreters for national emergencies or important events where it's very kind of right down the middle in terms of what they're interpreting. But what I'm really curious about is how do you communicate tone? So, for example, if you're, again, this is not a political show. We're not into that. But if you were interpreting a speech for a high-ranking politician or someone who was very excited where the words were less important than the tone, like how do you handle that, or how do you teach your other interpreters how to deal with that in terms of delivering the tone of the message as much as the words?
Well, I wouldn't be teaching the interpreters because they would come with their skill set ready to do this, and they should already know that American Sign Language is 30% hands and 70% face and body.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and because so many things look the same. You can sign, "Are you happy?" and you can sign, "You are happy," and it's the same signs, but one's a question, one's a statement, and when we hear somebody using English and they ask us something, we know what they're asking because the tone is obvious. But in sign language, we are conveying all this information visually to the deaf person. And every deaf person gets everything that we hear, they get visually, whether it's open caption, closed caption, writing notes back and forth, texting, emails, or sign language, or lip reading. If there are deaf people that don't sign and they rely on reading lips, it's really, really difficult, but they still are getting the information visually. So we call it matching register. If you are giving a speech, or this politician is giving a speech, and he or she is being just bombastic and angry and over the top and loud, well, that's how we have to convey it, because obviously the deaf person can see what the person is looking like and how they're behaving, but we match register. If you're angry, I sign angry. If you're tender and demure, I sign that way too, so that we match. And you'll also see that if you go to theatrical interpreted performances at theaters, where we are not just subtitles. We are humans trying to convey what we hear and what we see on stage to the deaf audience. And that's why it's called interpretation and not translation, because we as individuals are interpreting. It's our interpretation of what we hear. Translation is document to document. That is a translation. But we, as well as spoken language interpreters, are interpreters and not translators.
I will tell you one thing. One of my favorite Seinfeld episodes of all time was The Lip Reader. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Yeah, with Marley.
What? Yeah, yes. Where they're reading across the room, and Kramer is talking to the lip reader, is like, oh my God, she said, do you want to sleep together? It was actually, she said sweep together, and they misread it. There was a
Right.
huge fight.
Bill, were you on that one? Bill is oftentimes the
No, I know.
on-camera person with Marley Matlin.
Oh,
who
really?
Marley
Or
is,
on
yeah,
on set.
on
Yeah,
set.
I didn't do Seinfeld. I've done most everything else. Seinfeld I didn't do, and I can't remember why. But when I'm with Marley, because I work with her on set for most everything she does. She has groups of fans that always remember their favorite thing. And what you just said, Steve, was there's so many people that go, oh, I loved you in Seinfeld, or there's other people that I loved you in The West Wing, or I loved you on the L Word, or so there's all these different fractions of fans. But that one was very well written and very funny. But it's a great example of even a master lip reader has to know what the context is, because as good a lip reader Marley is, or my sister for that matter, if she just walked up to us having a conversation and I was talking to you, Bill or Steve, about I just bought a house with an island view, and she read my lips, it looks exactly like I'm saying I love you. So she would not know that we were talking about a house purchase with an island view. So oftentimes you have to set it up and you have to tell the deaf person, oh, we're talking about the weather. So when they see something on your lips like 66, which can look like 16 socks, they have to guess. It's 70% guesswork, lip reading. So they're thinking, okay, I think I saw 66. They must be talking about 66 degrees, that kind of thing.
Right.
So it's also a question deaf people get all the time is, do you read lips? And we all sort of read lips. We lip read the best we can, but it's a real skill, and not everybody can do it.
Well, and their lip reading in English and ASL or American Sign Language, the word order is different, isn't it?
Yeah, the structure is different.
Right.
ASL is its own grammatical language for sure. It's not based on English. So in English, our structure is subject, verb, object. I go to the store. I eat my food. In ASL, it's object, subject, verb. Store me go, car me drive, food me eat.
I once heard that Yoda speaks in American Sign Language. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Store go I, Luke.
You know what Yoda's last name is?
No.
Lehihu.
Yoda Leahy.
Okay, it took me a second. I got it.
Yoda Lehihu. Yeah.
How do you interpret what people say in general differently? Because a lot of times I listen to people, I go, okay, I have to filter out all the bullshit to get to the stuff that really matters. And it's a lot of work sometimes.
Well, I think a lot of interpreters do, because I often wonder how I would interpret that. And I do have a little sign on my desk given to me by Marley, actually, that says, I am silently correcting your grammar, because I'm a huge gramophile, is that the word? When I hear a mistake, it is like nails on a chalkboard. And people make mistakes when they give speeches or when they're speaking in general that can drive me nuts after a while. And also space fillers. You realize how many times people say or while they're thinking, they're actually vocalizing, and how many times people use like a Valley Girl, so she's all like, anyway, we're like, and then like these are things that you don't interpret because they don't really belong in the sentence. It's just how we speak in English. But I am constantly listening to how people put things together and how beautiful some speakers are. I have had the luck and the honor to interpret for every living president except the current one. And also for people like the Dalai Lama and Princess Diana and Elizabeth Taylor, a lot of people who speak for a living. I mean, this is what they do. They have audiences, and I can tell you probably the two best people to interpret for are the Clintons. Bill Clinton I have interpreted for 3 times, and Hillary once. And what comes out of their mouth, Obama as well, it's just eloquent and effortless, and it makes beautiful sense. And after a while, you sort of, as the interpreter, you find yourself in this space where your hands are just sort of dancing in the air, and then you interpret for someone else where your hands are not dancing in the air. They're stilted, and they're looking for the right word, and it does not flow. So when you get a speaker of great intelligence, it's so beautiful to interpret for.
The way you say that is so interesting. It's almost as if your hands have a mind of their own, that your hands are leading and you are following. Do you get a sense of that when you're in the flow of it?
When you're in the zone, absolutely. Even if for a play, if it's a well-written play, it's a very talented playwright, and the actors are in their zone, then we are in ours, because it just feels right. Everything is moving in unison. There are a lot of different styles to interpret. My style is pretty fast. I mean, every interpreter has a lag time. We are behind the speaker, and I don't have a lot of lag, and I never have, and that's just my style. But you'll see interpreters who are so far behind the speaker, but they never forget what the speaker said. They're able to stay with them even though they're several sentences behind. And I'm always in awe of those interpreters, because I don't know how they do it. I have a very short attention span and a short memory, I guess.
That's fascinating. And you're actually a listening improv performer in a sense, because you never know what they're going to say.
Right. And you're in that zone. And I think people have talked about this before, where a comedian or a speaker will turn to the interpreter and put them in the spotlight and either play with them or joke with them. And it's always uncomfortable, because now we are splitting our brain into, I'm here to interpret what you're saying, but now you're talking about me, and you're waiting for me to react, and it takes us out of that zone. It takes us out of that comfortable place of being the interpreter, because now we're sort of part of the act, and it's never comfortable.
It feels to me that would be almost a point of desperation for the performer. It's not going well, so they turn to you because they don't want to be alone on the stage.
Well, maybe. I don't know. But I
Bill,
can
come
tell
on
you,
in.
it's exactly.
Somebody help me.
Stop what you're doing. But it's very confusing for the deaf audience members, because they're now they're looking at us as the voice of that person. Well, yeah, our hands are the voice of that person, and now it's becoming very convoluted, and it's we always have to say, oh, he's talking to me right now. We have to sign that sort of, sotto voce, sotto mano, and it's just awkward and never fun. And people do it all the time. And comedians will say a dirty word, or they'll say something, and then they'll slow it down, and they'll look over at us, and they'll say it again because they want to see how we sign it. And it's great for the hearing audience. They think it's really fun, but it just puts us in a weird place.
And because of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, do you sometimes sign to in situations where there might not be deaf people? Or do you know if there's deaf people out there?
We don't always know, and they don't have to identify. If it's something that's open to the public, then that means it has to be accessible with wheelchair ramps and lighting and disabled handicap bathroom stalls, whatever. They have to retrofit places that are open to the public, and also provide interpreting services. So what they often do is they will hire us. They'll have interpreters either signing on stage to nobody or just at the ready, which always makes more sense, because I've often told people that by having interpreters interpret to no deaf people, it's the same as having a Spanish interpreter speaking into a microphone, and the headset that would be on the head of a Spanish-speaking person is draped over the back of a chair. So why are they speaking into the microphone to the chair? We don't need the practice. You know what I mean? So, but they are making it accessible, and that's always a good thing.
Do you find you ever deal with somebody who's intimidated by you being there, and them? Is there some sort of
I mean, in all the years I've done this, if they're a professional person that's been around, and this is what they do, then they're used to that. And like most audience members too, when an audience sits down and they see that this is an interpreted performance, they look over, they see us, and then they look back to the stage and they completely forget about us. Um, I mean, there are some hearing people that we see in the audience that just stare at us for the entire show because they're fascinated. But most people just kind of go, "Oh, the interpreters are here," and then they don't pay any more attention. So speakers, I've never had that experience with speakers. I have definitely had that experience with actors
Right.
who do not want interpreters on the side of the stage, and it's too bad. We have to be there. We're contracted by the theater, but I won't name them. But there are some people who just are livid that somebody could possibly steal focus from them.
Let me ask you a question. So one day you will say, okay, it's time to hang up the boots and
The gloves.
the gloves, right? The hands. Who is your dream person to interpret? Like if you said, I'm going to go out top of the mountain, like who would I love to stand next to and kind of say, this is time to wrap it up? Who is that person?
Good God, Steve, he's already interpreted for the Dalai Lama.
I know. That's what I was thinking.
There's nowhere to
He's talking
go.
about the Clintons, the Dalai Lama.
Honey Boo Boo.
But there has to be that one person.
It's a good question. I never really, when I look at my wall of shame or the whatever I have in my office here, I really have had the luck and the honor, like I said, to interpret for so many people, and I don't know. We'll have to do a part 2 of the podcast because I would have to think of.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that when he talked about wall of shame, he actually has a photo wall in his house. Do you still have that, Bill? Of all just a sampling of the people, but there's one picture that stands out, and it's a young Meryl Streep with an 8x10 of Bill Pugin, and she's looking at the 8x10 lovingly. And I always thought that was the coolest photo ever.
It's like she's holding a rare Greek urn or something.
That's my new nickname for you, Rare Greek Urn.
Rare Greek urn.
The reason I asked that question because there actually may be somebody that Bill would want to do that wouldn't be like for the top person. Because if someone said to you, "What do you want your last meal to be?" it would probably be something I wouldn't ordinarily eat because it'd be bad for you. So I was hoping maybe I get that weird, quirky, and Honey Boo Boo actually answered it.
There it is.
Actually, Honey Boo Boo's mom. What's her name? I would
Mrs. Boo Boo.
Mrs. Honey.
I think this is all a big boo boo person.
Mama June. That's Mama
We have
June.
editing capabilities here, Bill. Come on.
Actually, you know who would be fun? I think it would be fun to interpret Dolly Parton. Only because she has so many great stories, and she always comes across, I'm trying to remember if I've met her, but she always comes across like she's, fresh off the farm in Tennessee, and that she's not worth all this money. And
Oh my God.
I think she would be really fun if she gave I don't necessarily want to interpret her songs. Song signing I used to do a lot in the 70s and 80s and even 90s, but song signing it's lost its luster for me. But to interpret a speech by her, I think it'd be great fun. And going back to when you were giving your speech, Steve, you have a good interpreter if you ad-lib something and the audience laughs, and then 7 seconds later you hear more laughter.
So the one takeaway, Bill, to be a more effective communicator, to tell our listening audience, what do you think that is if you were to boil it down? Because here you are in a profession that notices so many nuances of not only the human language but of communication practices. What do you think it would be?
It's to pay attention.
I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, you were writing it down, weren't you? To not multitask and to pay attention, because that whole active listening thing is what we have to do in this profession. And when you meet or communicate with a deaf person, that's what they're doing. My sister, to this day, I mean, she speaks beautifully. I think I said she has 2 master's degrees. She's my hero. If I'm in the room with her and we're communicating and we're signing, and she also speaks, and because she spoke to me when I was a little kid, I didn't know sign language then. She sort of she's used to speaking to me. If I leave the room, if I am out of her line of vision just to grab a bottle of water, I'll tell her, keep talking, I hear you. And she can't. Once the eye contact is broken, then they stop because they don't know if we're paying attention. So paying attention, I think, is the number one thing, and really listen to what the other person is saying. So, in life, so you know how to respond, but in my profession, so you know how to interpret it.
That's really, really sage advice. I find that a lot in my practice, is that the people that can connect, I actually work with executives, and the first thing I tell them to do is when they're in a meeting to turn off their phone and to really make eye contact. It's such an important thing.
It's a lost art right now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, people are always looking down on their phone, and it's a shame because so much of life is going on. I was on a cruise a year ago, August, in Alaska, and my father-in-law said to these two little boys who were probably 12, we were in Glacier Bay, and he's 83 years old, and he walked by, and they were both on their phones, playing Game Boys or whatever they're doing. Chatting.
Fortnite.
Yeah. And he said, why don't you put those down and look out the window? You've never seen a glacier before, and you'll probably never see another one. I bet your parents would really appreciate knowing that they brought you on this cruise and you're paying attention to what's outside. And these kids were like, okay, Granddad, I don't know who you are talking to me that way, but, and they put their phones away and looked out the window. And I think we're just so used to not paying attention that it's, it's what we do now. But in my line of work, you have to. And
in everyone's line of work, actually, that's such a great statement to make for the end of our podcast. So, and there it is. So, Steve, do you have any?
By the way, they're using sign language back here, Bill. They're like this thing across, like cut,
like wrap it
stop,
up,
and wrap it up.
They're doing a circle by the ear. I think that means we're crazy. I'm not sure.
So. Well, if there was a camera on this podcast, I could show you some other signs. But before we hang up, don't you want to know what completely silenced 5,000 people as the audience of the Dalai Lama? Do you want to know what he said?
Bill, what silenced the Dalai Lama's audience?
One question from the audience was to His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Your Holiness, is it okay to kill a mosquito? Well, you could hear a pin drop. Everybody was leaning forward. And he has an assistant next to him that sort of interprets for him, just to make sure he gets it. And he, of course, I'm leaning back. I'm close to him, but I'm trying to, he's not that easy to understand. But he said, you might want to write this down, Bill.
Okay.
He said,
paying attention.
When mosquito land on my arm, I shoo it away. If mosquito come back, I kill it. And he slapped his arm when he said, I kill it.
So you have to learn from your mistakes, I guess.
Or you have to hope that that's the same mosquito that landed on your arm.
Right, exactly.
No, you get one chance.
Murderer.
You get one chance.
You get
That's
one chance
right.
in life. Absolutely.
Yep. Well, I have to tell you, so when Bill filled me in, Bill, what you were up to in life, it seemed very interesting because we are in a communications crisis in this country, I think, because between people keeping their heads down and looking at their phones and not looking people in the eye and
Pokemon Go, falling off cliffs.
But we are in a moment in time where like everybody's yelling and no one's listening.
Yeah.
And I think what Bill mentioned earlier, we can all hear, but none of us listen. And
Right.
I actually learned a great lesson from my daughter when I was talking to her about doing her homework. In mid-sentence, and I didn't think I was yelling, she looks at me and she said, Dad, when you yell, I don't hear anything.
Yeah. That's
and
good.
I said, that's really a very profound line. And so I do think in the world we're in today, we all need to do a better job listening and communicating. And I love the simplicity of what you do in terms of communicating messages for other folks.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, Bill, and thank you, audience, for listening. to our show. And Steve, do you have anything else to say?
Bill, I believe I do, and it's written down here somewhere.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Is this the show closer?
Yeah, but we don't have to do it right now.
No, but
I want to hear it.
Okay, here we go. All right.
and speaking of contribution,
We'd like to sing the praises of the unlung. See, I'm gonna mess it up. All right,
it's okay.
Start
So,
again.
here's the thing. No, you don't have to start again. We want to be authentic here.
That would have been hard to interpret, Bill.
Hold on, his hands froze.
Yeah, my hands froze. When you get your thoughts together, I'll be ready.
Okay, here we go. So no, wait, let's do this one.
Our
Yes.
mission is to provide the inspirational stories of society's team players, and that, my friend, is you.
That is correct. Now that I can get on board on that. So thanks so much. Thanks so much for what you do and being so funny and delightful, Bill. We appreciate you having you on the show.
Thank you, guys. It was my pleasure.
Thanks, Bill. This was a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for listening to Unsung Leaders. This podcast both showcases and is made possible through the talents of many people.
And on that note, we'd like to know about the unsung leaders in your life. Those people that have pulled together to create something that has positively impacted you or made a difference in your community.
Our mission is to provide the inspirational stories of society's team players.
So please nominate the team players in your life to potentially become guests on our show. By logging on to www.unsungleaders.com, you may be giving us all the opportunity to hear their stories and learn from their contributions.
And speaking of contribution,
We'd like to sing the praises of the Unsung Leaders team.
our producer and sound engineer, Josh Fisher,
Production facilities provided by Embassy Row.
with a special shout out to Shannon Hawes Perry, who oversees our experience here and makes it very easy for all of us.
And for all of us at Unsung Leaders, I'm Bill Benson,
And I'm Steve Moscow.
teaming up to make a difference.